My first area was Ocoa. I was there for 6 months, so that's a longer time. Like I said, it's like the coldest area. So actually, I was expecting to be hot in the Dominican Republic like the whole time. And I got there around the end of February, and I was freezing at night, which I was not expecting. I remember grabbing all my clothes, like the cardigans I didn't need, and like putting them on top of me to sleep at night. Like, it was just so cold. So I ended up having to buy a blanket, which I thought was crazy. Like, I didn't need a blanket. But it was really interesting because since it was in the mountains, one of our areas, we had to cross a river and climb up the mountain, which is about an hour walk up, an hour walk down. And I was like, oh, this is so fun. And then when it rains, it floods, and like, oh, it's crazy. But I loved Ocoa. Since most people in the South are poor, that story that I shared about bien tiempo, like that was when I was in training. So it is more poorer areas, but it's very beautiful, very green since it's mountainy. A lot of rain, and a lot of people actually go there. We'd always run into Canadians, which I was like, why is there white people here? Like, what? Because people always stare at us, and I'd stare at the white Canadians that came in. I'm like, who are they? I'm like, is that how they feel? Like, is that what we look like? But so that was my first area, and I really liked it. Then I went to that area to the capital, which is a different change for me. It was hot, and I got my first Latin companion. I got a Dominican, so that was a big change. I went from like cold, beautiful, large area. It was a lot of walking to like the capital, small area, hot. I was speaking Spanish all the time, and it was challenging, and the work was a little bit hard. It was a branch, and there's a lot of things that were happening. But I was only there in that one area for a transfer, because then we whitewashed, and we switched with the elders in our same district, I think it was, or zone. So then I stayed in the capital, but it was a different area. I went from a branch to a ward, which was weird, because in the Ocoa it was a branch as well. And so all of a sudden I was in a ward, and there's a bishop, and there was callings, and we weren't teaching all the time, and I was like, whoa. Work was different because you're in the city, and it's hotter in the capital, I feel like, because there's not as much airflow because of all the buildings and stuff. And then I went from there back to the south to San Juan, and that's another beautiful place. I was blessed. I went to Ocoa, and then I went to San Juan, which is another beautiful area. And it wasn't super mountainy, but it was out there in the countryside, and just really wonderful people. I have a wonderful family there that I met, that I consider them my family, and I ended up training there, and so it was just a great place for me. And then I left that area and went back to the capital, to Quisqueya, it was around May, June, July area time that I was there, and so it was really hot again in the capital. But I was in a ward again, and it's cool to have like the different. I was glad I served in the South and capital to see the different type of work between a branch and a ward, between walking a lot and not walking as much, because my mission was just walking. We didn't have bikes. Sometimes we would take little taxis to areas, but not usually. It was mainly for like conferences and stuff. We would take those. So I had the different heat and cold, and it was fun. The houses are a lot different than they are here. Usually it's just like concrete, like blocks, and depending on how wealthy you are, you have either tin roofs or you actually have like a wooden roof, because the tin is really loud when it rains, and it rains quite a bit. It's interesting to me, like in the capital especially, is where I saw this the most, is you could have a really nice house, like nice areas in the capital are way better than the houses I've seen here. I'm like, whoa. But then you can have just a couple houses down this alleyway with this, like, call them callejones, which is like houses built on houses like crazy, just on top of each other in small areas. And that's why I said, like, neighbors are basically family, because you basically live right there. And so those are the more poorer areas. So I thought it was interesting, like the change between that. Mainly missionaries work more in the cajones and stuff like that because it's harder to get into a nice house, or sometimes in some places in the capital there's like apartment buildings you have to do intercom, which I didn't like that because like in the other areas, like in the south, you just say like saludos like outside the door, and they're like, oh, come in, and they don't even know you. So it's way more welcoming in the south than it is in the capital. I feel like the less nice their house was, the more hospitable and welcoming they were. But yeah, so it's a little different. Most houses are like very close to each other, either on top, a little bit below. The building structure is a little different. There is a lot of rain. Dominicans too, they don't like rain. It's so funny. They think they're gonna get sick. I mean, you can get sick. I won't, discredit that, but they also, like, they don't want to get their hair wet because they wash it once a week, and so they need to keep it nice and straight because it's crazy curly. And so what they do if it rains, they put bags on their heads, and if they have to go outside. If not, they won't go outside if it's raining. And I mean, as a missionary, we tracked in the rain. We have umbrellas, or hopefully do. And they just yell out like, no se mojen, like, don't get wet, come inside. And I just remember walking in flooded streets, and it was kind of fun because you're like, whoa, puddles and stuff. Falling in isn't the best, but there's just a lot of rain, and so just expect to get wet while you're there. I think the most craziest was when I was in my first area in Akoa. Since it was raining a lot, the streets were flooding. We had to climb up this thing and try not to fall into this like river, and not that it was like a crazy river, but like the river of the street. And that's how like the streets get clean, so you don't really like play in the water because all the trash and stuff gets washed with it. And there's a lot of stray dogs, so there's a lot of stray other things. So this was a lot of rain, and you just walk through these rivers. So I recommend like plastic shoes for those because they just get really wet.